Good morning, Bruno.
Hey Nick, how are you?
I'm good and you?
Good.
Good. You're showing me up in your suit today, my friend. So, back for another episode of PLA. We got another two questions today. Bruno, we're going to start with your question. We've had an inquiry from one of the clients, and they are asking us to just highlight and go through the different types of organizations of business structures that are available within the South African context.
The South African context and the legal framework provides for a vast array of different types of entities that can actually conduct business. But the reality is, under the Companies Act, the best entity to conduct business is the company. So that's the PTY Limited or just the LTD, which is a public company. So it's private company or public company, right? Now, why is this the case? The Companies Act is designed to govern how companies engage in business affairs. Certain things in the Companies Act actually create standards for how shareholders engage, how directors engage, what the expectations are, what the directors' duties are, and what remedies people have if any of these duties are contravened. And so it's built into our legislation and makes it particularly easy for a shareholder or interested party to approach the courts in the event of something going wrong. Even if internally they belong to the company, they're a shareholder in the company, they're a director in the company, certain rights are afforded in the legislation. So if we start comparing the use of companies, private companies or public companies to, say, for example, a trust in order to conduct business, it's chalk and cheese. A trust can conduct business. There's nothing wrong with a trust conducting business. There's nothing wrong, for example, with a partnership conducting a business. The challenges that we're experiencing in practice is that because a trust, for example, is quite rigid, it's very difficult to change trustees at the office of the Master of the High Court. It's also very difficult to obtain documents from the Master of the High Court. So if you look at a trust from a transparency perspective, even though our country has moved towards having these more transparent, the reality is the access to this information is very limited. So that's the one thing to bear in mind. So from a practical perspective, a trust isn't a great vehicle within which to conduct a business. A partnership, yes, you know what? It's not bad. There's a lot of law around partnerships, and people enter into partnerships quite frequently. And that's when two people decide that they're going to enter into a business venture together, but it's not under a formal entity like a trust. So you often find that in partnerships, the two persons that enter into that partnership together are personally liable for the debt of the partnership. So any business that gets conducted by even the other partner within the partnership lands up falling squarely on the shoulders of the other partners too. So there is a level of risk involved. So if we take it one step further and we start asking ourselves, well, what is a small business corporation? What is a turnover corporation, right? Are these other types of entities? What about those? The Companies Act doesn't seem to mention anything about them. Well, that's because they're no different. In fact, it's tax terminology versus actual company terminology. So we need to understand that a small business corporation can come in many shapes and sizes. This is SARS's attempt to try and incentivize small businesses to deal with their tax affairs in a very specific way. So this can be individuals, can be companies. That it's not that matters. There, what you're looking at is, for example, an annual turnover of no more than 20 million rand. If you can fit within that scope, you don't have any other shareholding in any other company, as an example. It's not a personal services company, although there is an exception to that rule, and it's under the 20 million rand mark. You may actually be able to benefit from having a small business corporation. And again, it's not registering a separate entity, it's simply changing your tax type or tax status with SARS. And the tax rates for a small business corporation are a lot better than a company, because a company starts at 27%. With a small business corporation, it works itself up to that with smaller percentages. So it actually creates tax brackets for the taxpayer, making it more beneficial. Turnover tax, for example, for companies, certain companies can register for turnover tax, provided they're under the 2.3 million rand mark, they can register for turnover tax. And again, you find that this is highly beneficial for companies that are able to actually pay the tax on the turnover, which is about 1%. And if they do the calculation, depending on what their margins are, they'll actually find themselves in a very, very beneficial position because this replaces all tax types. So you don't have to pay any other tax within this particular registered entity because this replaces all tax types. There is something that needs to be considered. It is the tax trap. So one thing that we need to understand is, remember, a small business corporation or a company, for example, can actually run at a loss. And this loss can be carried over, subject to certain limitations, year after year. If you register for turnover tax, it doesn't quite work like that, because whatever your turnover is, you're still going to be paying tax on it, even though at the end of the day, you ran at a loss. So that's the only trap that I would suggest that people look at. But if you're running a business under the 2.3 million rand mark, again, you only have shareholding in that business, personal services, bar the exclusions, and you're considering doing something like this, it's a great, great idea. Just look at what your margins are, do the maths, and if it makes sense, it makes sense. There's nothing wrong with it.
Perfect. Thank you for that,